Good afternoon or good evening, depending on where you are listening to us from and on this big, beautiful planet of ours. This is Michael Cross here with another edition of Unlock the Door Radio here on UCY TV Productions, where, as our motto, we say, question authority. That's right, and that came from none other than Benjamin Franklin. Now, the thing that I would like to deal with tonight, before I get into that, I should make a little plug, check out my website at michaelcross.net or my YouTube station at Michael Cross. Anyway, what I'd like to deal with at this moment is the issue of, the advantages of, I should say, of buying more and more of your stuff locally. And I don't mean driving down to the local big box store, okay? I mean actually buying your stuff from small businesses, local farmers, and that sort of thing. Because we hear a lot about how we are becoming a centralized oligarchy. Okay? For those of you that are not familiar with that term, an oligarchy is somewhat similar to a monopoly, except that in a monopoly, you figure there's one corporation that owns everything. Whereas an oligopoly is where you have a variety of mega corporations that carve out their niche and they stifle the competition from the little guy. Now, Jimmy Carter recently said the United States was no longer a democracy, it was an oligarchy. Have to agree with him. You've got, and the same is starting to happen more and more in Europe, where countries will have dominant corporations. And these corporations can kind of, they call up their local parliament member or congressman, senator, whatever you call it, and they ask for a lunch so they can discuss some policy. You better believe there's more likelihood that they're going to get lunch than if you, as an individual, call up your representative and say, hey, this is Todd or this is Daniela, and, we'd like to just chat over lunch about what your stands are on this particular issue. Okay? Chances are you're not going to get much of an audience. Now, the thing is, I'm going to go through a variety of reasons why maybe this should be something you change. Okay? This should be right up there on the top of the agenda for your consumer purchases. Because most people don't connect to this. I think most people that would listen to this do. But a lot of people out there just don't connect to the idea that when you buy something, you're voting for that product to be made more. Okay? So, in a sense, when you watch a TV show, if it's connected in some way to some sort of tracking system in which they can tell that you're watching that TV show, they're going to make more TV shows like that if lots of people, tune in. Same with music. If you pay for certain types of music, they'll make more of it. If, on the other hand, you go to a very large corporation and buy your stuff, then that corporation's getting your vote. It's getting your resources, and that will enable it to lower its prices, perhaps, and make it more competitive against smaller corporations that might be, even more innovative. But yet they're not going to get the capital necessary to really do the job that would be necessary to really compete with a large corporation. And also, as we centralize our corporations, which means centralizing your choices, that means that local producers, okay, let's say Ted's, whatever, I'm making this up here, Ted's hardware store, they cannot possibly compete against a very large big box store, because the big box store can take a smaller profit margin and therefore survive on that. And if there are hundreds and hundreds of these stores selling tens of thousands of hardware items maybe a day, then there's no way the small guy can really compete with that. So you got to ask yourself, well, isn't it better just to get more money, for what I spend? If I go to the big box store, then I can get stuff cheaper. Well, ultimately, it doesn't come out cheaper because maybe Ted no longer can compete. So his company shuts down, which means less tax revenue to the state or to the local community. It also means less diversity when it comes to choices because perhaps he did offer some things that the big box store doesn't because it's going to base its inventory on what moves, what sells, whereas maybe he had some stuff that was, stuff that it had a market, but not enough to really support him. And on top of that, where's Ted going to work? Okay, is Ted going to have to go on food stamps, which means more money being spent by the taxpayer? You see what I mean? We often don't consider the high price of low prices. I think there was a documentary out there called that at one time. I don't know, but I've used that phrase a long time. That it actually comes up, the idea that you will spend more in the long run for if there's less diversity economically. So that's the number one reason I would say right there. Support local community businesses. I was just in Rome, okay? And that's really interesting. When you're in Rome, there is so much variety of things you can buy there. You have small companies, small restaurants, small cafes, small clothing stores, everything. And these are often just owned by just, a family or an individual. And it gives more variety in what you can find there. A lot more selection. And, it might, someone could say, well, maybe that's not as efficient. Maybe not. But ultimately you get more, community that way. More people have work that way, at least living wage jobs, and jobs that really give a sense of accomplishment. Okay? I mean, yeah, you could work 40 years for some department store and, maybe you're going to be lucky enough to survive on the income, but you're always just going to be a clerk in that department store. And when you retire, you'll be replaced overnight. Versus if you have a small business, then that's something you can be proud of. This person, it sets a tradition for the community. So think about that a little bit when you're making purchases. Maybe it's better to be able to have this idea of what used to be called window shopping. Go down and just walk around the street and look into various stores and stuff to find things. Nowadays, I mean, what good's window shopping if you go to this mall on this side of town, it's going to have the same stores as a mall on the other side of town. And if you go to, the big giant department stores and stuff, that's going to kind of have the same stuff. Okay? It's kind of a muck culture. And yes, culture and items that we buy are interconnected to one another. Okay? They are. If you have things that are more local, then you're going to have more connection to the roots of that community versus if everything's just homogenized and I can buy this, I can go to this restaurant, but I can also go to this restaurant if I fly over to this other country and go to a mall there. Okay? It is, to a large degree, it is getting to that point where, you're going to go from one big city in Europe to another one in Asia or to the United States, and the stuff's going to all be the same if things continue the way they are. Okay? Yes, it's economically efficient in the short term, when it comes to cost. than it is to have lots and lots of, thousands of different choices. But ultimately, it does preserve culture and give people, I think, in the long run, way more choices. So, anyway, what are some other reasons that you could think of? And one of the things that really struck me is I saw this post somewhere in social media that says when you buy from a corporation, you're helping some CEO buy a third vacation home. When you buy from a small local establishment, you may be paying for someone to get, I don't know what it was, some little girl to get violin lessons, or a boy to be able to go to soccer camp that summer. Okay? That's how it really does boil down to, all right? In fact, it used to be that people would say, well, yeah, but those corporations put people to work, but do they put them to work in the United States anymore? Think about that. The people that have jobs in the United States in the corporate world are the ones who are more administrative at the top level. But those kinds of companies don't usually make their products in the United States anymore, and they're increasingly shipping those businesses to cheaper countries that can that maybe a worker gets paid hardly anything. And this is just my speculation right now. Okay, this is speculation. But I just was wondering, why did Barack Obama choose 2016 to go to Cuba? Okay, why did he go there? You think it's just to be like, hey, Cubans, I love you and everything, and let's make the past the past? Or do you think that we're going to see some large corporations maybe wanting to go in there and take advantage of low pay? Okay, let's see what just happens there, all right? Because I think very few people envisioned the idea that when Richard Nixon went to China and established better relations, that would eventually lead to a lot of the businesses in the United States relocating to China. I'll bet you they didn't think that. That was probably the last thing on their mind. It was probably like, it's going to be good, because people need to get along with one another. People, we don't want to have wars. We want to have cooperation, stuff like that. All right? And that's probably what they saw back in the early 70s when Nixon went over and made better relations with China. So what are some other types of things? Oh, yeah, let's not forget this. Okay, now this is one of those issues that maybe vegans are going to go, hey, wait a minute, it doesn't make any difference here. You're just, being nice and everything, but it's not really being nice. But I'm going to say it. If you buy from local farms, the animals are going to be treated better. Okay? Take a look at a local farm on how they treat their milk cows, how they treat animals that are being raised they're being raised for meat, okay? All right? Local farms, though. Check out how pigs and chickens and animals like this are treated. And then, I challenge you, go on to, YouTube and just type in factory farms and animals. How are the animals treated at those places? Now, my parents used to, we didn't have a lot of land, but, they wanted to kind of have this kind of feel of being, in nature. So, they did the hobby thing. You raise some animals and stuff like chickens and so forth. And the thing is, I can guarantee you that the chickens they killed, those chickens tasted way different than the chickens you buy at the store nowadays. Okay? Totally different flavor. It would be almost like the difference between pheasant and chicken. And the thing is that with these chickens would wander around. They'd eat bugs, eat anything. Chickens will eat anything that won't eat them. Sometimes they'll eat each other. One of them's sick or something like that. But the thing is that they have a chance to exercise. They have a chance to get out in the fresh air and so forth, and they're getting more natural food. And whereas if they're raised in a factory farm, in crowded conditions, artificial light, all this kind of stuff, you're going to get a difference. But the thing is, I'm just looking at from a ethical standpoint, yeah, sure, the animal's being killed. But in one, you could almost think maybe the chicken being raised on the farm is going to regret having to get its head cut off, whereas the chicken at the factory farm might be going, please get me out of this misery. Okay? So just do that. So that, and when you buy from a local farm, you're probably going to get animals that were treated much better than the ones that were raised in these factory farms. And sadly, we're starting to, factory farms, sure, they're more efficient. You just crowd those pigs in, till they barely move and just feed them and feed them and feed them and feed them. Yeah, you're going to turn out more. You're going to turn out more meat. And of course, we define the meat as being, whatever you take off the pig. It may not be as lean as a pig that gets a chance to actually walk around and swim around in the mud and do all those kinds of things that pigs do in nature. So, there's going to be a quality thing. So maybe even if you're just at a regular store and you see like the organic or free range animal products being sold, yeah, they're more expensive. But think about the fact that when you buy those, you're encouraging those kinds of establishments. And if you live in an area that does have direct farm access to where you can go and sometimes buy a side of beef and put away in your freezer, good storage there. You never know what's going to happen in the future. I'm not going to make any references to The Walking Dead, okay? But you never know. So anyway, the thing is that if you buy your food like that, you're going to get, in my opinion, you're going to get a different sort of animal, and you're also going to be encouraging more people to stay on the local farms. And just like I said before, when it comes to when you buy something at a local store, you're going to be maybe what you're doing is you're going to be helping to pay some kid's college. Okay, the farmer's kid, has to have college education, so you're sending him off or her off or whatever, and you're encouraging stuff to be bought in the farming community there. When they buy grain, when they buy this and this and this and this and this, they will buy from local more, if it's produced. So there you're doing something, you're doing something for animal rights. I know people, the real hardcore vegans are going to be saying, wait a minute, you're missing the point. No, I'm not, because most people are not going to give up eating meat. Okay? It's not going to happen. So we should look at the ethical treatment that we give to livestock. And I think you're going to get better at a local farm. And I have not actually seen any studies that have convinced me that acre per acre, you really produce better, you're producing more if you do the factory farm approach. Maybe there's other factors you have to look in. But even if it was true that factory farm can produce way more per acre than the local farm, I still think it is a better thing to have local farms. And that connects us to our heritage. Okay, isn't it nice sometimes to be able, to take your kids? Sometimes schools will arrange these things where they go on field trips and go to a local farm and say, hey, there's where your milk comes from. I think a lot of kids nowadays have no idea where their milk comes from. They think it's probably produced in some lab someplace. And they're able to see the animals, and they're able to, connect in a more meaningful way. If nothing else, maybe the kids will learn, don't just, I don't like this hamburger, and just throw it in the garbage. Okay, they'll appreciate that it takes work and effort to get food, especially meat, onto their table. So, yes, that's another factor that comes in. Now, the other things that you can look at when it comes to the local community, I've already talked about the idea of you're helping the tax base of your community. The more local stores, the more things that are there, you're going to be encouraging more community development, because they'll be paying taxes, property taxes, or you got the sales taxes, stuff like that. isn't it better to keep it more decentralized where everyone's got, all kinds of options for buying things? Okay. I like globalization in many aspects, but the whole idea of globalization for just big corporations to find cheaper labor and stuff like that somewhere, anywhere in the world, I'm not really a big fan of that. All right. I understand why they do it. I understand the whole concept of follow the money and all that kind of stuff. But ultimately, I think it's better to have production at home. By the way, what would ever happen if we got in a war nowadays? I mean, a lot of our the minerals and the mines have been shut down because they weren't as profitable as getting the stuff from another country, that we use for our computers and our guidance systems for the military and stuff like that. What's going to happen, if we're suddenly caught with our pants down? Well, the reason why we won World War II, okay, was because America was there to supply lots of items, like, because of the industrial might, they could turn out trains, they could turn out planes, they could turn out tanks, and just replace whatever was destroyed really quick. The Germans had a limited amount of ability to do that because of their resource and energy shortages that were, that they faced. And Japan was severely limited by it. So this is what really caused the war to be won. Yeah, sure, lots of men sacrificed their lives and so forth, but without that industrial might, then I speculate the Russians could never have held out, because, we were giving weapons to the Russians, the British, and so forth, and America could not have gone over and, conquered Japan. All right? So it would have been kind of a stalemate in the Pacific. So that's national defense there. So yeah, when you buy local, some of the people are like, I go to a farmer's market because I don't like capitalism. Well, that's capitalism. But the thing is, you are actually helping the defense industry, in a sense, at least America, to be able to maintain its independence and not be left vulnerable for lack of resources. Now, I said the thing about building communities. Wouldn't you? Isn't it kind of more fun to walk into a little bookstore that sells certain types of books, and the same person's been working there for 30 years, and maybe your parents bought some stuff there for your, when you went to school, and now you're buying stuff for your kids, and that same person that sold it is still selling it? Isn't that much better than, okay, on aisle 7 we have school supplies, books are on aisle 12, and that sort of thing. Or big bookstores that, they may be all nice, have a lot of selection, some ambient music in the background and some, coffee and whatever that they may offer. But ultimately, what is more fun? I think going through these little tiny bookstores is more fun. That's really my personal opinion. But the thing is, those kinds of things build community. Just like if you're looking for jewelry, all right, of a certain type. You go into Oregon, and there's a lot of this, like, really interesting, unique types of jewelry you can get at different stores because you have local people. A lot of them, like, ex-hippies and stuff like that, or hippies still. And they sell the kind of stuff that you can't get at a big box store or at a national jewelry chain. And it's always way more interesting to have something that's different than everyone else. Okay? That's way more fun. And in a sense, too, that if you're talking to the person that produces it, and maybe they can even show you how they make this stuff, then that's community. That is being personal with production. Even though you're not the one producing it, you're still personal in that you see how everything works. And I think that's quite interesting. And that's going to be lost if everything is just, big giant chains that, you load the supplies up in the truck and take them around, to the various stores and just drop them off. You don't know the people that make the stuff. You don't know the people that even deliver it. Now, the other thing too is accountability. If there's a certain store in the area that sells a certain product or service, let's just say it's anything. They you can come with your own examples here, but they sell a certain product or service. Then, if they do a good job, you can go, you're going to hear it word of mouth, and that will encourage the survival of that business. But it also gives you a chance to evaluate things better. And, you don't know. You buy something at a huge store and you don't know anyone else that's bought the same product. And then all of a sudden you find out, you talk to someone you inadvertently bump into, and they mentioned they bought the product. They didn't like it because it didn't do this and this and this, or it just wore out fast. And you find out, yeah, that's what happened to mine too. It wore out really fast. Well, local stores, it's much easier to have that kind of accountability. Okay? Because, the store, if it sells junk, is going to go out of business. So, some other reasons, ultimately, we've talked about animal rights. We've talked about, to a certain degree, environment, or maybe I should go into that a little bit more. I think ultimately the places that are in a community are going to be more caring about how the community is, how it's run environmentally, how the looks of the local area are going to be, and so forth. They really do care. Because they grow up in the community. Their kids go to school, same places your kids go. There is more a sense of accountability. That's something most people don't think about there. Think about maybe your last few purchases. Who would you contact if you had a concern? Or if you call them, think about how many. Press 1 if you want this. Press 2 for this. Press 3 for this. And then your number 75 in line. Please hold on. We really appreciate your business. Is that what you want? Or would you rather be able to just walk into a store and say, hey, maybe you should do this. Or, that tree that you're thinking of cutting down over there, couldn't there be some way maybe that you don't cut it down and maybe still be able to build around it? Okay, large corporation, they don't care what you think. The smaller one, they might listen to you. Now, some of the other aspects that you should consider ultimately is, we could talk about the macroeconomic things, trade deficits. Isn't it better to make something at home than it is to buy it from other countries? And then they get the money, but it's not being circulated here in America, or if you're listening in some other developed country. And so we maybe should consider these things. Again, whenever you spend money on anything, consider the fact that you're voting for more of that to be done or more of it to be made or produced. And then think about what you want to see more of. You want to live in a community that has lots of big giant corporations where you just go in and buy something? Or would you rather have your community look a little bit more like the 50s? I'm not saying, that everything was great in the 50s. You couldn't go and buy any computer or, really fancy phone and stuff like that. That's what I mean there. Okay? But your community can have character if you buy locally. And it gives you more things. And this is something I kind of forgot there. It gives you more to do. A lot of communities, they have craft fairs. They have local farmers markets. Where I come from, they had Saturday market. And, sometimes even just going down, just the idea of there's something you can do on Saturday morning that's different. Something you can take the kids to go see all these really interesting candles that these people make at home. or clothing and stuff like that. That's an experience. It's part of learning. Okay? It's not the antiseptic, sort of sterile, giant chains, approach to infrastructure. Okay? So please, give it some thought. This summer, it's a perfect opportunity. Go out, buy some stuff that's locally made. Try to go a little bit. Try this as an experiment. I don't know if you buy into the whole, you should go organic because it's healthier for you. I don't know. Some of the claims I see from the people that say, you need to eat more natural foods and stuff like that, I'm not totally sure of. But many of the others, they make a lot of good sense. And I think this is why more and more people that don't, more and more people that don't wear sandals all the time and wear tie-dye t-shirts and that sort of thing, more and more just everyday people are shopping at places that sell natural organic foods. Make this a trend for a lot of stuff. Give it a try. See what you think. It's not that much more expensive. Maybe ultimately, what would you rather have, though? Would you rather have a locally sewn special sweater or two that you could buy at the department store? Okay, what would mean more to you? What is more unique? Think in those terms once in a while. And maybe we could have a healthier community, healthier individuals, and a more well-rounded society overall. On the second half of the hour, I would like to deal with something that's been really bugging me, and that is this particular election cycle. Now, this is the strangest election. Come on. This is absolutely, positively the strangest election cycle I have experienced. Okay? And I've been voting since, the presidential election, the first election I voted for Ronald Reagan back in 1980. All right? And I still remember actually the first campaign though I ever worked on was when I was I was 16 or 17. A feisty, Jewish Democrat was, in our, county. And I really liked him. I really did. And, I worked on his campaign. He got elected. And so after that, I worked on a conservative Democrats, state legislative campaign. And I've been involved in a lot of electioneering ever since. I've been a delegate to the National Republican Convention before. Okay. I think I was one of the youngest when I was sent there, back in the 1980s. But the thing is that I've seen a lot of stuff in elections, but my gosh, this is the weirdest election I think I have ever seen, the weirdest election cycle. And I just have to say, it's for both the Democrats and the Republicans. Now, I think most Americans, whether they are Democrats, whether they are Republicans, I think most Americans have an expectation of fairness. They believe, whether it's true or not, they do believe that if they go out and let's say 40% of them vote for a particular candidate, that candidate will get 40% of the delegates to a national convention. And there won't be any, monkey business going on in the background from the party elite of either party. I think this is the first election people have actually really, though, come to the conclusion. I was talking to someone yesterday. She's from Canada, so, I'm not sure if she supports Ted Cruz or not. I didn't ask her. But she was asking a question that I think a lot of Americans are asking, like, well, who's in charge of the elections? Isn't the federal government in some way in charge of the primaries? And I said, well, actually, the primaries are something that's the political parties themselves. And this is something that I think most people did not know before this election. They assumed that an election had a certain set of rules that was drawn up, I don't know, by some sort of election committee somewhere. And those rules had to be followed by both the Democrats and the Republicans. Well, guess what? Not the case. I mean, you got the Democrats with their super delegates and the Republicans with their, we don't gotta vote this in this particular state. We don't have to give it to the people. Or, at least that's the impression. I've had some people I know who are Republican who have said, well, it's not exactly the way it worked in Colorado. Okay. I don't want to spend the whole show dealing with the subtle nuances of the various elections around the country, but the perception is what is important. I mean, heck, there was some gentleman who was a lifelong Republican, and he put out a YouTube video, he's from Colorado, where he was burning his Republican registration card or something. I mean, Republicans are angry. All right? Republicans feel like they're being shut out because their perception, okay, I almost said that with a New York accent. I'm supposed to have an Oregon accent. It's perception, not perception, but perception. Oh my gosh, if Donald Trump gets elected, we're all going to be speaking a little bit more New York style as time goes on. Well, anyway, the thing is, the perception is that it should, that in some way voters were not counted. And that's going to damage the party. All right? If the perception is that the leadership hates Trump, and they're going to do everything they can to prevent him from getting the nomination, then are you going to actually tell me that after the election that the people who were like really ecstatic over Trump are going to fall behind Cruz and say, yay, Cruz? What's going to be the campaign slogan? Better him than Hillary? I mean, that's what the Republican leadership, I think, believes. And, I've actually been in meetings where you had state party people talking, and maybe there's like a liberal Republican running in the primaries, and, people are kind of not supposed to really, support one candidate or another, but the idea was that, well, hopefully this particular person, will win because they have a better chance of winning, around the state. And, inevitably the question would come up, well, what about conservatives? They don't like this guy or this gal. And a lot of times the leadership, at least in my experience, would say something to the effect of, well, what? Who are they going to go for? Okay? Who are they going, are they going to go for the Democrat? Of course not. They'll vote for the Republican because they may agree with the Republican on 50% of the issues, whereas they may disagree with the Democrat on 90% of the issues. Now, and so I think this is kind of the sense, but I personally, I'll say this, hopefully no one's going to get all angry, but I like Cruz. I like Trump, either one. I'm one of those people that's just like, well, whichever one gets it. And there's positives from both that I see. So I'm not a fence setter. I'm just saying there's certain things about Trump that are fantastic, and there's certain things about Cruz that are fantastic, okay? But what if it happens that there's a huge impasse, that there's so much fighting at the National Republican Convention this summer that you wind up with a situation in which neither one can really muster the votes? Because once it gets thrown into an open ballot voting, there's many of them that are pledged to, there might be some that are pledged to Trump that really, at the beginning of the election, they started out as Jeb Bush supporters. But, they were elected delegates, so they have to, on the first ballot, have to vote for Trump. But on the second, maybe they'd be thinking, Jeb Bush, maybe we bring him back, to life. Then there's people that support Rubio, and there's got to be a couple of them in there that support Kasich. But then, what about Paul Ryan, Mitt Romney? What if one of them is suddenly, there's a spontaneous, we know that Franklin Roosevelt said there's no such thing as accident when it comes to politics. He also, I think, said something about presidents are selected, not elected. But the thing is, what if the Republican voters are given a choice between, someone that would come in and save the day, or Mitt Romney or Paul Ryan, and then they get elected? What are the crews? I mean, if you're suddenly met with Mitt Romney's face, on the campaign posters for 2016, if you're a loyal Cruz supporter or a Donald Trump supporter, are you going to want to vote for Mitt Romney? You might see that this was all some sort of game. I mean, that perception again. Maybe Mitt Romney's pure as a driven snow and had nothing to do with anything behind the scenes. Okay? I have no proof before me right now. But if the perception is that things happen behind the scenes, then how is that going to play out when people go and vote? I think a lot of people, I'm serious, I think there's a lot of people that'll just say, what difference does it make? Hillary, Romney, big whoop-de-doo. And they do not vote in that election. Or they write in their favorite candidate. They write in Ted Cruz. They write in Donald Trump. Okay? That could happen. And if there's a lot of dissatisfaction, you might have some other third-party person, a libertarian or whatever, suddenly garnering a lot of votes. Protest votes, probably. But still, it would be getting a lot of votes. And this is a lot to do with the perception. A lot of stuff in the media. You can't keep things quiet nowadays. Sure, mainstream media is going to put out, the mainstream ideas. Okay? But now with the internet, people are seeing things. They're seeing speeches on YouTube that maybe only have 20,000 people who clicked on that speech. But they're seeing a candidate say one thing, and then the media say they said something else. They see the media cherry-picking throughout Donald Trump or Ted Cruz's statements on issues. And then when they play them, it sounds like, oh my gosh, they make these candidates seem like they're total wackos. Unless you actually watch the recording. And then you see, well, wait a minute, that's not what he said. And the thing is that even though there may be 20,000 people that saw that, well, maybe they're sharing some information from that on Facebook or Twitter or whatever. So the big gatekeepers, the mainstream media, the corporate media, the corporations I was talking about with the whole globalization thing earlier this hour, they're not able to keep track of everything anymore. Things are leaking out. It's like having a fish net that you've drug across the river, but the holes are big enough that some of the fish are getting away. Now, before the internet, you didn't have to worry about that. You had a nice solid net. Hey, that's pretty good. You have fish net and the internet. Oh well, anyway. The thing is, now you don't. Because people can get out there. And that's going to bring something else up. Friend of mine, he signed me up on social media for a whole bunch of Bernie Sanders sites. Okay? And what's interesting, second here, Skype. Yes. What is interesting is I'm able to see a lot of the stuff that's going on with the, that race. And it's no different. In fact, in some ways, the Bernie Sanders people are far more angry at what's going on in regards to Hillary and the Democratic Party than the Republicans are towards, Trump, Cruz, and the Republican National Party. And what's quite interesting about this is that many of those Bernie people are turning out videos, they're turning out memes and stuff and quotes from Hillary. I'll give you a little clue. If you're part of the Cruz or Trump campaign, we're working out there, or just, regular person, doesn't like Hillary, get into some of those groups, sign up for them, and start, saving the stuff so you can use later, since I think Hillary will get the nomination. Because it is just a treasure trove of negativity towards Hillary. And the thing is that you're seeing a situation in which many young people, especially young men, who were really, really, really idealistic and thinking, hey, this guy, this Bernie Sanders, he seems very genuine. And they may not even agree with all of his stands, but he's a genuine sort of guy. He stands for what he believes in, doesn't hide, doesn't confuse people with political rhetoric that hides what his true agenda is, doesn't look you in the eye and tell you you're wrong when you know you're right. Okay? These people have gotten a huge wake-up call in the form of a Hillary Clinton bulldozer running over them. And it goes beyond the superdelegate thing. It goes into what their perception is of fairness. Because I look all over the internet and I find these things where after every primary, someone is saying, look what is illegal. I don't hear things being done by the Bernie people during the polling that is suspicious. But I sure hear a lot of the Bernie supporters saying, hey, well, look what happened here. This is illegal. Okay, now whether it's legal or not, they're getting it out there. I saw one today. Someone posted about something going on in the polling places in New York. It had something like 44,000 views. The thing is that I don't think, can be counted on to vote for Hillary. Now, many of them will. Many of Bernie's supporters will look at Cruz or Trump or, who knows, Romney, and they might think, you know what, I'd rather have Hillary. So I think actually the majority of the people that are voting for Bernie Sanders will vote for Hillary. I mean, the really committed ones. But I've heard figures up to 40% that will not. 40% that will not vote for Hillary Clinton, and will actually vote for Trump. I haven't seen something where it said, would you vote for Cruz? But many of them would vote for Trump because they see Trump as an outsider. And they may not like his stands on a few things. They may not think there should be a fence down there between Mexico and the United States, for instance. But they're going to see some of his other stands and think, hey, maybe he could go for it. I was talking to some Bernie supporters yesterday. And I said, what would you think if Trump were to take Bernie Sanders as his vice presidential candidate? They got all excited. That's right. They were going, whoa, that would be so cool. And then they started listing the things that they see that Trump supports and that Bernie supports. Both Bernie and Trump are not neoconservative warmongers. They both want to kind of scale back on the whole empire building schemes of the neocons in both parties, Democrats and Republicans. They both have said, hey, we need to fix our infrastructure. We do need to look at the fact that some people can't afford medical care. Now, the thing is, these issues I don't see it happening, but it would be interesting, could unite Trump and Bernie. And there's where we go back into perception. If the perception that many people have out there that are Bernie supporters is that, it would be kind of cool if Trump would choose Bernie at least as a vice presidential candidate to go up against Hillary and whoever she chooses. I don't see Hillary choosing Bernie as a VP. Then that is what you have to look at from a political psychology standpoint and think, there's some merit to this. There is a possibility that this could actually work out. And whereas I don't think it'll work out, it's more of a political fantasy. If you have Trump versus Hillary in the national election, then there's enough support for some of the things that Trump has done, or enough antagonism for what they perceive Hillary has done, that they will vote for Trump. Again, I don't know. I haven't seen any polls as to what Bernie supporters would do in regards to Cruz. I have talked to people who've said, and this is just what they've said. I've told you I could go for Cruz or Trump, no big deal. But I have talked to people who've said that their perception is that, and this is a quote, not even paraphrasing, that Cruz is a religious nut job. That's a quote. Trump does not get that aura coming across. There's many, many secular, and I would argue potential libertarians. They think they're socialists right now, but potential libertarians out there amongst young people that might actually think that, they're thinking to themselves, I could go for Trump because he's not claiming to be the big church candidate. He's not claiming that he's going to restore a Christian nation. Okay, when Trump says "Make America Great Again," it's kind of a generic, secular even approach, kind of like the founding fathers when they said, one nation under God, or all men are created equal, that sort of thing. Very general. You could be a Jew, Muslim, Christian, whatever, and still think, yeah, it's cool. Now, the thing is that they might actually stay home or actually even vote for Hillary over Ted Cruz. And again, it's hard to really pinpoint, but the perception that the Democrats have of Hillary right now as being the candidate of the 1%. She is the people that Occupy Wall Street was protesting. She's one of them. And that is not lost. Now, many of the organizations are so scared of a Republican, they all suddenly oh my gosh, and really, really demonize whatever Republican. But there's many, 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 many people on the Democrat side that they're looking at Hillary going, why doesn't she run as Cruz's running mate? Or, has she run for president and maybe Cruz vice president, or Rubio, like Rubio or Jeb Bush would be more acceptable as a running mate for Hillary Clinton. That might come up. You never know. She might choose a Republican running mate. Someone who's socially liberal but is neocon. Be watching for that. And, the media would just give so much fanfare for that. They'd be like, look, she's really reaching out and trying to have this broad base of Democrats and Republicans. So be watching. If I was Hillary, I would do that. I would choose a Republican running mate. Now, the thing is that beyond that, a lot of the Hillary people are hey, they look at Bernie Sanders and say he has supported civil rights and stuff throughout his entire career. And then they'll turn around and see that Hillary does not support the things that she claims to. Now, regardless of whether you're for gay marriage or not, it's immaterial. Do you have more respect for someone who might say they're pro-gay marriage? I mean, they were against gay marriage, and then maybe say something like Obama did, say, well, I kind of analyzed it, and blah, 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 and, they kind of do that. Or someone who was adamantly, gives a speech that's negative to gay marriage, and then turns around and says, oh, yeah, and then kind of gives the impression that, this is something that's just part of them. I think a lot of people don't see that as sincere. And again, who knows why she changed her view? Maybe she changed her view sincerely. Maybe she, suddenly thought, well, maybe it's okay. I don't know. But if people out there just think she did it for political reasons, it doesn't matter what her actual view was. It only matters that they believe that it could be for political reasons. And therefore, it loses some of its credibility. And you don't know where the person's going to be later. What stands are they going to be when they're elected? Suddenly, they just start, doing their own thing and forgetting about the campaign promises and so forth. So, you see, there is on both sides, we just have this crazy situation where people are just about ready. It looks like we could, at both political conventions, we could see a repeat of the 1968 Democratic Convention, in which you had protest in Chicago. You had, it just was chaos. And you could see the same thing take place this year with both the Democrat and Republican conventions. I'd predict it more for the Republican, but I think that it's not going to be, this is, for ratings, for the media, this is going to be great. I mean, people are going to be tuning into that Democratic Party convention and that Republican Party convention. Who needs to watch, the latest thriller on TV when you got that? The real thing could get very interesting. So, in the last few seconds, I would just encourage people to really examine this, see what's being said by the other side. If you're Republican, check out what the Democrats are saying. If you're Democrat, check out what the Republicans are saying. You might find it very fascinating, but you also may find that there is some common ground there. That maybe you're a Democrat, but you're so sick of all the wars. Okay? Like Libya, Syria, these kinds of, non-war wars and that sort of thing. And maybe, you want to see someone who just says, nah, I didn't support that in the first place. You might like Trump. That could happen. The thing is that the next president is going to be in here during a really crucial time. Our relations with other countries are at their lowest. Okay? You think things are good right now. You just check. They're not. Okay? And foreign policy, domestic policy, an economy that I would argue is teetering on another, I think we still are in a recession, but a repeat of 2007, 2008. Whoever's in is going to really need to know what they're doing in order to keep a cool head, make sure we don't have more wars, and make sure the economy can be straightened out since our middle class is dying. Anyway, we'll take those issues up next time. But thanks for tuning in. I'll see you again next week here on UCY TV's Unlock the Door Radio.
JJ Inc. from Against the Wall, and you're listening to UCY.TV.